So for fantasy wide receivers, as we have done the last couple of weeks with the quarterbacks, with the running backs, and then last week with the tight ends, or I should say more particularly with the running backs and the tight ends, the way we've been doing it is we've done the top 10, give you sleepers and some players to avoid. With the wide receivers, since there is so many, and this is pretty much going to be the meat and potatoes of your fantasy team, we're doing 15 players that we think are your top guys that you should be really targeting. We have a couple of sleepers and we have a couple of guys to avoid. In terms of the fantasy, we always talk about the, what league you're in, whether it's in a individual league or a keeper league. But yeah, we also talk about ADP. If you don't know what ADP is, it's average draft position. We have one that we follow. We do ESPN, where we get most of our information from, but yeah, taking a good look at some of these players, always starting at the top and then making our way down. I think like what we were saying before we actually went on to our podcast, we thought there's gonna be the top five should be fairly similar, and then we feel like from 6 down to 15, there's gonna be a lot of changes. We're going to see a lot of similar players on the list, I'm sure, but
Oh
maybe
yeah.
in different spots. But yeah, I'm curious to see who we each have as our number one.
Well, for me, my number one is the guy we just got finished talking about, and that's Tyreek Hill. I think he has the potential to remain at the same production level he gave us last year, whereas some of the other guys that are up there in that top spot, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, guys that are being talked about, I think we might see a bit of a drop off for them. Whereas Tyreek Hill, especially with Jalen Waddle still being there, signing a new contract, if they're both healthy, I expect Tyreek Hill to likely be the leading receiver in the NFL this year, in yards at the very least, if not touchdowns. So Tyreek Hill, his ADP right now, or when I did my list, was sitting at 3. He could have moved up or down from there,
Yeah, he's
but
sitting
that's
at
where
three for mine as well.
yeah. So I mean, Tyreek Hill, your third overall pick, and honestly, I'd be comfortable taking him as high as number one. Like he is a prospective number one pick.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill, number one receiver for me as well. This is a guy that last year was on pace to break that 2,000-yard reception, to be the first receiver to ever do it. And the only thing that slowed him down was that injury. And if he managed to stay healthy, he was going to smash it. And I like exactly what like you said. I have no reason to believe that Tyreek Hill can't and won't be the number one receiver this year. CeeDee Lamb kind of took that crown from having a really, really strong back half of the season. But Tyreek Hill, man, like he is that dog. He is
Yep.
that guy, and Tua still knows how to throw the ball to him. And McDaniels, their head coach, still knows how to scheme him up and scheme him open. He's gonna be so hard to block. He's a cheat code. He's the fastest guy on the field. He can catch the balls at a really, really consistent rate, and he runs good routes. Tyreek Hill is a cheat code, and yeah, at 3, I would be ecstatic to get him at 3. I would,
Yeah.
I would argue he is the number one player in this fantasy.
No,
So
that's fair. I mean, I still favor Christian McCaffrey just for the diversity in what he can do. But yeah, I like I said, Tyreek Hill is a legitimate number one option for you to take first overall in your draft on your team. Have him as your wide receiver one. Like you're gonna be happy every week if that's the case.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
and number 2, I have Jamar Chase. To me, Jamar Chase was the number 2 wide receiver in last year's class behind Justin Jefferson. And I really do think that if Joe Burrow can stay healthy for a full season, Jamar Chase and Joe are going to have a special year. I really think those two guys, again, they were buddies at college. They
Hmm.
obviously both were able to get to Cincinnati. Joe was a big player in asking for Jamar to come to Cincinnati. He's been a top 5 wide receiver in the league ever since entering, pretty much. And yeah, it is such I think those two this year are going to have a special year. There's something inside me that's just saying the, they are going to absolutely wreak havoc because it's not like Jamar Chase is a rookie anymore. It's not Joe Burrow throwing to a rookie Jamar Chase. They're both experienced seasoned guys in the NFL. And I know with some more questions about the wide receiver room in Cincinnati, Joe's going to really lean heavy on Jamar. And we know Jamar doesn't really matter if he's covered, he's going to make plays. And so for me, that's why I have Jamar Chase as my number 2 fantasy wide receiver.
That's fair. He is in my top five, but he is not my number two. My number two is still CD Lamb. I know I do expect a bit of a drop off, but the thing we got to remember is this is contract year for CD Lamb. This is contract year for Dak Prescott. Those two guys are going to be trying to go lights out. And so even if he misses out or drops 4 or 5 passes in a game, I still expect him to be catching over 5 passes a game, most likely. And so I do think he's still going to put up some big yards this year. I think CD Lamb is still going to be a stud in fantasy. Um, I don't see enough of a drop off for me to worry about dropping him too far down. So, and right now his ADP is sitting at 2, and so I, I I'm comfortable still taking CD Lamb at the top of my draft.
Yeah, and for Jamar Chase, his ADP is 6, so you're going to see a lot of very similar.
Yeah.
And for me, with CD Lamb, he is also in my top 5, but a little bit lower down.
Yep.
I'm just worried about that Dallas offense. You know, with Mike McCarthy, we know what his play calling is. He doesn't
Yep.
really change a whole lot. And I
Hmm.
think with that offense, with it really being only CD Lamb for Dak Prescott to throw the ball to, I think teams are going to look at it and go, if we stop CD, it's going to be one of those things where it's going to go, who else on that team is going to beat us? And I still think CD Lamb is a great receiver. He was the number 1 wide receiver in last year's fantasy for rankings. He's still going to be very good, and we never. The last time that we saw a wide receiver 1 repeat was Antonio Brown a few years ago. LOL. But yeah, I don't think CD is quite going to be as high,
Hmm.
but I still think he's going to be phenomenal. Like he's still one of the
Yeah.
very best wide receivers in the league.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and that was sort of the same concerns I had with Jamar Chase is Joe Burrow's health, and then the fact that there aren't a lot of other weapons on that team. So they're going to be in similar situations where Jamar Chase, C.D. Lamb are both going to be facing a lot of double teams this year, and just with Joe Burrow's health, eh, I'm unsure whether he'll be able to play a full season. And
Yeah,
then you look at the secondaries in the AFC North, it is turning into a scary secondary to play against in that division.
yep. But
Yeah.
your number 3 receiver, good sir.
Number three is where I have last year's number one landing, Justin Jefferson. I still we talked about him earlier. He's going to put up phenomenal numbers. He still deserves one of the higher contracts to be given to a wide receiver. Whether it's Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy throwing the ball, as long as they can get the ball in his general vicinity, he's going to make those plays. And he's not going to have as many concerns about double team coverage because he's got Jordan Addison to take some of that pressure off. He's got TJ Hawkinson to take some of that pressure off. They've got Aaron Jones now, who also will catch the ball out of the backfield on occasion. So there's a lot of other weapons and options there that I think will free Justin Jefferson up to still put up some excellent yards this year for the Vikings.
Yeah, for me, Justin Jefferson was my number 3 receiver as well. I look at him and he's the best receiver in football. The only reason he wasn't the number 1 receiver last year is because he missed 4 or 5 weeks at the middle portion of the year. If Justin
Yep.
Jefferson had stayed healthy and he was staying consistent with some of the numbers that he was putting up, he would have been the number 1 wide receiver. And it's not like he just played with Kirk Cousins. He played with, I think it was 4 different quarterbacks throughout this season, and his numbers were still elite. And realistically, it's only going to be 2 guys that are going to be throwing him the ball this year. And yeah, Justin Jefferson, where his ADP is sitting at number 5, I think if you can get him at pick number 5, you are a happy, happy man. But yeah, both of
Hmm.
us have our number 3 guy right there. My number 4 was CD Lamb, so we already chatted about him. We kind of already said I
Yep.
like him as my fourth receiver on this list. It's really hard to kind of really just change him and put him lower than where he is. But yeah, I I like CD Lamb at that fourth. His ADP of 2 is too rich for my blood. I think if you can get him at that 6, 7 spot, you'd be pretty satisfied with it.
Yeah. Yeah, my number 4 is Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Detroit Lions. He had a phenomenal year last year. Struggled a little bit with injuries for a few weeks there, but other than that, he was ultimately the primary target for Jared Goff, and he was the safety blanket as well. You know, when they knew they needed a first down, they were going to Amon-Ra. And so I think he's going to put up similar numbers to last year. It's not going to be a surprise to the league this time though, because I know last year it was kind of his breakout year. It surprised a lot of teams, and with guys like Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs coming on and getting a little bit stronger this year, that's going to take some of the pressure off Amon-Ra St. Brown and maybe limit the amount of double teams he has to face, which will just increase his yield and his yards.
Yeah, I have Amon Ra on this list. He's not in my top 5. But yeah, with him, he is a very very talented receiver. He's gonna demand a lot of catches. I think he's going to be good, but I don't necessarily have him in that top 5. He's a little bit down on my list, but a lot of things that you're saying are very, very true. He's reliable, but
Yeah.
kind of similar to what you're saying about almost Jamar Chase in a sense of that division that he's going to have to go up against. He's going to have to
Hmm.
go up against the Bears, who have the best secondary in the NFL twice a year. He's going to have to go up against the Packers, who have Jair Alexander, who is going to be able to compete with him. He's going to have to go up against the Vikings, which have a little bit of a lesser secondary, but their defense is getting better with Brian Flores, so you can never really count them out. So and yeah, we know what Amon-Ra St. Brown is now. I think the league truly understands what he is, and there's gonna be a little bit more in my opinion. He's still one of the very best. I know when we did our top 5 wide receivers in the league, he was both an honorable mention for us in that regard, but yeah, your top 5 or your
Yeah,
fifth.
my number 5, that was where Jamar Chase landed for me. So, and I already touched on him. You know, my concerns there, like with him and Amon Ra, they could be interchangeable, except for the fact that it's Joe Burrow's health. You know, at least with the Detroit Lions, that offense, as far as we've seen, Goff is healthy. Everybody's healthy there. There's no injury concerns. Whereas Joe Burrow, it's basically a season he can play and a season he misses. So we don't know what season we're going to get this year, whether it's going to be a full season or an injury season.
Yeah, and with Amon-Ra St. Brown, his ADP was 8 for me.
Yeah.
That's I feel like that might be 2 picks higher for me than I would be willing to take him, especially with some of the other guys. For my number 5, I have Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson this year is going to be very, very good. His ADP right now is sitting at 14, so midway through your second round. And I know in the podcast earlier, we were talking about Aaron Rodgers' health, but if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, Garrett Wilson, he could easily be wide receiver 2 on this list. He has the talent, and for me, I have to put him there just because of the idea of Aaron Rodgers and his health. Now, if Aaron Rodgers isn't healthy and he doesn't play a lot of the year, like what we saw from last year, Garrett Wilson is probably still a top 10 receiver. It's just who's throwing him the ball. He's still going to be very, very productive. So there's a little bit of risk, but there's still a lot of upside to it. If you draft him, you're still getting a top 10 caliber fantasy wide receiver. But if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and you get him at 14, oh my goodness, you are going to be in a very, very good spot.
Yeah, I was a little more bit more concerned with Garrett Wilson. He is in my top 15, but he's much farther down. And so I just, he was a little higher. I did drop him a few places when I saw that footage of Aaron Rodgers because the concern is without Rodgers throwing that ball, don't think he'll be as good. He's still top 15 in my opinion, but I just I
Yeah.
struggle putting him in my top 5.
Like I said, for me it was this is a risk, but the
Mhm,
reward that you're gonna get, I feel, is way outweighing the risk because you're still getting a top 15 guy, but if Aaron
mhm.
Rodgers is healthy, you could get a top 2.
Yeah.
You're 6, my good sir.
Number 6 for me is a guy that didn't even get drafted in a lot of the leagues last year. He was picked up on the free agency wire, and that's Puka Nacua. He had a lights out year last year as a rookie, 5th round pick, I believe.
Yep.
And I expect him to just continue that this year. He's coming into a team that's going to be starting the season healthy Kyron Williams, healthy Cooper Cup, which means it's not going to be all on Nakua's shoulders, which will allow him to be open a little bit more often, I think, because teams are going to have to account for Cooper Cup and Kyron Williams. So that's why I have Puka Nacua at my 6th receiver. His ADP when I did this was 9, so he's still slated to sort of go in that top 10 area.
Yeah, I have Puka Nacua on my list. He's a little bit farther down. For me, I didn't love the ADP. I looked at that ADP and I went, he's a great wide receiver, but you know what, we did see what that rookie season was like, and my concerns are the load share that is going to happen with Cooper Cup while he's out there. I still think
Mhm.
Puka is going to be the more efficient receiver, but I just go with the way that Matthew Stafford and Cooper Cup have really built that relationship. I think it's going to be a little bit more of Cooper to start the year as opposed to Puka, but he's still a phenomenal wide receiver.
Yep.
But yeah, for me, the biggest reason why I had him a little bit lower on my list was just because of the target share that he's going to have
Mhm.
and his ADP. I don't love it at in the first round. I think if you can get him in the second, third round, like the late second, early third round, that's probably his best value in my opinion. My number 6 guy was Amon-Ra. So, like what we said right there, he was just
Yep.
on the outside for me. Again, unfortunately, in the both the rankings for where we actually have him in fantasy football. For me, my number 7 guy is AJ Brown. AJ Brown has just proven these last 2 years, ever since leaving Tennessee, he is one of the most dominant receivers in the NFL. And I really do think last year's Philadelphia Eagles offense that we saw was a little bit more of a fluke. And I really think this particular this particular year, now that they don't have Jason Kelsey, they're going to put a little bit more pressure onto the shoulders of Jalen Hurts in the throwing department. And when Jalen Hurts starts throwing the ball a little bit more, that just means AJ Brown's numbers are going to be better, and his numbers have always been very good. So, and just taking a look here at his ADP, when I take a look at 10, I think
Yeah.
again probably still a little bit high. You know, he's going to be either the last pick in the first round or the first pick in the second round. I think in the early stages of the second round or the midway stage of the second, both very good range for him to go. But yeah, for me, number 7 is AJ.
Yeah, I had one guy that just edged out AJ for that number 7 spot, and that is DJ Moore. Probably I think the lowest ADP we've seen so far in this list at 27. So mid to late 3rd round, they've got him going. For me, DJ Moore, he was lights out last year. He was easily one of the top 5 receivers, and that was with Justin Fields and a struggling offense. He's going to have Caleb Williams this year. He's going to have a really good supporting cast of receivers in Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze now. It's honestly, the sky's the limit for DJ Moore. I think we're going to see a baseline of really good weeks with some spikes of just, oh my God, how did he put up those types of numbers? That is just unheard of. So, yeah, DJ Moore for me is someone that I don't know why he's going so far down. Maybe it's because of the load share that could happen with Keenan Allen and Romo Day. But I think very quickly Caleb Williams is going to realize that DJ Moore is the guy he wants to get the ball into his hands first and foremost. He's going to be the first guy he looks at on every play, in my opinion, and it's going to reflect in those stats come the end of the year.
Yeah, DJ Moore, he's my number 9 on my list, so he's, I think, the next pick right after. But yeah, a lot of things that you're saying, the
Yeah.
only reason why I have him a little bit lower on my list is just simply because of that load share. And you know, DJ Moore is the best receiver on the Chicago Bears right now. I know Keenan Allen, he's a Hall of Famer, but you know, with his age, and Romo, or pardon me, yeah, Romo Dunze is the fancy shiny number 9 pick, and he's going to be great in the NFL. But DJ Moore, when you look at him, we both unanimously said he was a top 5 receiver in the league, and with an upgraded offense, with a quarterback that can deliver him the ball a lot more consistently, it's going to be, I think, the early stages of the season while Caleb is figuring things out. He's going to try to spread the ball all over the field, and then it's something's just going to click, and it's just going to be DJ Moore is going to have like 4 catches for like 200 and something yards and 3 touchdowns in a game. And it's just going to be like, oh, all I have to do is just throw 5 yards down the field to him, and he goes and does this. I'm
Yeah.
just going to do this a lot more. But yeah, I had him at 9. My
Yeah.
number 8 guy was Puka Nakua, so we already kind of touched on him. But yeah,
We
with
did, and hmm?
DJ Moore's ADP at 20, for me it's 29. I think you have it at 27.
Yep.
Just different timing. So sometimes when we do our list, they update at different times, but still
Yep.
pretty much right there. I think if you can get DJ Moore mid to late second round, early third round, you are going to be extraordinarily happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. You know, and if some of these other guys are off the list and you're looking at DJ Moore for your wide receiver one, grab him because he's going to be able to put up consistent numbers even on weeks where the ball's being spread to Keenan Allen, Romo Dunze. So yeah, you had who at number 8? You said Puka Nakua?
8, I had Puka Nakua.
Yeah, and my 8 was AJ Brown, which we also touched on already. So, who have you got at 9?
DJ Moore.
That's where you have DJ. So my number 9, I have Mike Evans, another lower ADP, but a guy who consistently year in and year out has been doing great things. We thought last year we would see a drop off just because Baker Mayfield coming in. Is it going to be the same sort of thing? And it was. You know, Baker Mayfield was able to find Mike Evans on a regular basis. He still topped that 1,000-yard mark, I do believe. He had a lot of TDs, and now they're comfortable with each other and they're both still there. I think this year is going to be an even better year for Mike Evans because of that. And so that's why he landed in my top 10 at that 9 and an ADP of 35, so mid to late 4th round, I believe.
Yep.
It's a good spot to take him. I would be comfortable taking him as high as the middle of the 3rd round, honestly.
I'm a little bit lower on Mike Evans. I don't have him on my particular list just because I think the age is definitely going to start to hit him. And we do know with the Buccaneers that it's, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces. Chris Godwin is also there, who is another really good wide receiver. Mike Evans is pretty much like an honorable mention for me on this list. If we did 20, he would be 16 as opposed to where he, you know, he's not on my particular list. So, but I just feel like with the age and kind of with that team kind of where it is right now, where there's still some uncertainty surrounding it, I just didn't feel like, but he's going to be steady. He's going to get you a very consistent, steady points. Like one of the things we talked about so much last week with the tight ends is there's going to be guys that just go like this. They're just
Yeah.
flatline the entire time. That's kind of what Mike Evans is. And so I feel like you're probably going to have some guys that week in that are on this, my particular list, that are going to have, you know, weeks where they're a little bit lower, but then they're going to be really higher. And it's going to, you're going to kind of have that. So Mike Evans, you know, he's going to be really consistent, but, you know, there's going to be times when those players that maybe have like a little bit of a lower week triple their production the next week. And so that's kind of why I don't have Mike Evans on there. But yeah, it's understandable why someone else might.
Yep. And so rounding out the top 10, who have you got in your 10 spot?
At number 10, I have Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams, to me, with the Las Vegas Raiders, is still one of the very best wide receivers in the league. And with Gardner Minshew there, I genuinely think he has an upgrade at quarterback over what he's had the last couple of seasons in both Derek Carr and Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell couldn't hit him at all. Now, with Devontae Adams, if Aiden O'Connell is the starting quarterback for the Raiders, I would be very concerned with drafting Devontae Adams. But with where Devonte Adams is in terms of ADP, he's at 16. I feel that's definitely too high. This is more of like a mid third round type player for me. But it is like Devonte Adams is still one of the very best wide receivers in the league, and Gardner Minshew throwing him the ball is an upgrade. And I'm not sure the offensive coordinator is an upgrade in Luke Getsy over what they had, but when you have a dominant receiver like Devontae, it's going to be hard to not get him fantasy points. I will not be selecting Devonte Adams because of the whole 2 points at the end of last year. But yeah,
Devonte Adams is not on my list. I'll touch on that later and why that is. My number 10 is Stephon Diggs. Traded from the Bills to the Texans this year. He is going to be going down there to Houston and catching passes from the reigning offensive rookie of the year. And we've seen Stephon Diggs. He has that big personality and he can be a problem in the locker room. But his first year when he goes to a new team is usually very good and he keeps his head down and puts up the stats. And that's, I think, why the Texans brought him in and then wiped the back half of his contract and were like, we're going to keep you for a year and then you can go play in Dallas. So I think Stephon Diggs is going to have a sneaky good year this year because everybody's going to be looking at CJ Stroud and what's he going to do. We talked about Nico Collins a little bit earlier and getting paid. Is he going to be the number one? I think Stephon Diggs is going to be that number one option. And I think he's going to improve his play this year over what we saw at the end of the year last year with the Bills. Because when Diggs starts getting frustrated, that's when he starts making the mistakes. I don't think we're going to see that frustration from him in year one with the Texans, and all we're going to get is year one with the Texans.
yeah, I do not have Stephon Diggs on my list just because I think Nico Collins and Tank Dell are better wide receivers than Diggs right now, and I think CJ Stroud is a lot more comfortable with those two guys, and I think he's definitely going to lean heavy on those two guys a lot more than Stephon. I think. I
Yeah.
think everyone kind of knows that he's going to be this 1 year type of player for the team, and I don't think CJ really cares for that big, larger than life personality. He's going to go, I'm going to go to the guy that's giving us the best opportunity, and if you're just going to whine, then I don't care.
Yep.
And so for me, that's why I don't have Stephon on my list.
Yep. That is fair. And that's why we talked at the beginning how our top 5, 6 in that range was going to be the same. And then you get into more of the personal preferences and what we think is going to happen with these players. And that's why you're starting to see guys that are on one list and not even on the other.
Yeah. Next up for me is Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk, he's going to be in a loaded offense. But I think even with the 49ers last year, with that loaded offense, Brandon Ayuk was easily the most reliable player on that team. And he's still going to be very, very good this year. Now, if he gets traded, it's going to be depending on where he gets traded, but he's still going to be the number one option where he gets traded. So I know one of the favorites for where he's going to go is your Pittsburgh Steelers. If he goes to the Steelers, George Pickens isn't going to be the number one wide receiver. It's going to be Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk is a top 10 receiver in the NFL, and he is still going to put up a lot of fantasy points. He's going to do really good numbers with him being the number one receiver, even ahead of Deebo Samuel, in my opinion, on that team. And he deservingly should be there. And when I look at the average draft position, he's 34. So you're getting him in the middle of the fourth round, which I look at that and I go, yeah, if he is there at 34, I would be running up to the podium and taking the pick.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I agree with everything you said there about Brandon Ayuk. For myself, over at number 11, that is where Garrett Wilson fell to for me at the 11th pick. And then my number 12 was Brandon Ayuk. And so, yeah, everything you said, that's that's why he's my number 12, because he's going to be the number one receiver no matter where he goes, unless that trade location is Miami, Dallas, or Minnesota. That's
I
the
I would
only
I
way.
would argue Chicago as well.
Yes, yeah, yeah, but that's DJ Moore would be better. Yeah, I agree with you there. So, I was more just looking at our top threes area, my top three specifically, and it's like, yeah, those three guys he's not taking the number one spot from. But yeah, most teams he will be your number one wide receiver, including the 49ers.
Yeah, exactly. Up next for me at my 12th spot is the first Texan that I have on my list, and that's Nico Collins. Nico Collins, to me, he really showed out last year, and he was one of those guys that kind of just came out of nowhere, and I think he could be very similar to an Amon-Ra St. Brown, of where this guy is just a worker. He's just gone out and done it, and now he still has his offensive coordinator there from last year, which is very, very big for both CJ Stroud and for Nico Collins. But the fact that he has Tank Dell also on the team, he has Stephon Diggs also there. I think a lot of people are going to be more focused on Stephon Diggs because, again, he's been the high profile name for a lot of years. And Tank Dell, he's gonna be this like exciting young guy, and people are gonna forget about Nico Collins, and he's gonna start to burn players he's going to start to burn teams week in, week out, and people are going to go, God damn it, like, how do we keep forgetting about Nico Collins? And for me, at number 12, I feel that's a really, really solid spot for him.
Yeah, his ADP was just too rich for my blood. He made my avoid it at their ADP list personally, because late third round was too early. And as you saw, I think Stephon Diggs will be the more primary receiver in Houston this coming season.
Fair. Yeah, I just I don't know about Steph. I just think it's just such a 1 year type of thing where at
It
least
is.
with Nico, but yeah, you're 13th.
Number 13 for me is DK Metcalf with the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, he's been a consistently great wide receiver. He is a beast. He is huge. And that offense just keeps getting better. I expect Jackson Smith and Jigba to take a step this year as well, which will help take some of the pressure and the double teams off of DK Metcalf. And then Geno Smith has been very comfortable in that offense, and they've now brought in what they think could be the future successor in Sam Howell. This could just be great things going forward for DK Metcalf and the Seattle Seahawks. I think Metcalf is going to be a touchdown machine for this team this year.
Yeah, DK is my 15th guy, so pretty much everything that you're saying right there, I tend to agree with. The only reason why I have him lower on my list is just I don't know about the offensive coordinator. We all know my opinion on defensive minded head coaches coming into the league and then just trying to fill out that spot to someone else. And with Tyler Lockett there, with Jackson Smith and Jigba there, with Noah Fant there from the tight end spot, there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed. But DK, he is that monster. He's the number one receiver on that team for a
Yep.
very, very good reason. For me, my number 13 player is actually Marvin Harrison Jr., the fourth overall pick for a damn good reason. This is a
Hmm.
guy that arguably you could say is a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL, and he hasn't played a down in the NFL. Watching him at college, he was doing things that were just sickly. Like you're just watching him, it almost looked low effort because of how easy it looked. And Marvin Harrison Jr., he has a great head on his shoulders. He didn't participate in any of the offseason stuff because he said, I'm focusing on football. I'm not
Yep.
doing the combine. I'm not doing a pro day. I'm focusing on football, getting ready to be a pro. And we've seen with some of these guys with Hall of Fame dads come into the league, they can absolutely go. And we all know that Kyler Murray is going to be looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. and licking his lips, going, thank God. I finally got one. Well, we all know that he had why am I forgetting his DeAndre Hopkins for a while, and we saw what Kyler Murray was able to do with D Hop.
Hmm.
He's gonna be able to do better things with Marvin.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. And that's why Marvin 14th spot at that very next position. right behind DK Metcalf. And that's really only because I haven't seen anything yet. That's the only reason. But there was no way I was leaving Marvin Harrison Jr. off of my list because I expect to see some phenomenal numbers from him. I think he's going to be competing for that Offensive Rookie of the Year title with Caleb.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Marvin Harrison Jr. at 19 for ADP,
That's a
I'm
little
not
rich.
in love with the ADP. That
Mhm.
feels like it's like, oh, he's the fourth wide, or he was the fourth overall pick in the draft, and if it wasn't so quarterback heavy, he would have been the number 2 pick in this, that, and the other thing. And he is this great guy. But I sit back and I go, let's, like, I know we kind of jokingly said, or at least I did, that he's a top 15 receiver in the NFL already. Let's give him a few weeks before we crown his ass. Like,
Yeah,
like,
100%.
so 19 feels rich for me. If he was there midway through the fourth, I would be jumping for joy, going like, yes, yes, please. I'm happy to take him. But yeah, so the ADP a little rich for my blood, but still, if you're in a
Yeah,
keeper league,
yeah, exact. That's what I was just gonna say. The only caveat for if it's a keeper league, then I'm comfortable taking him late second round because you've got a wide receiver one for the next 6 years, however long your keeper league goes on. Basically,
yeah,
you've got a wide receiver one. So
it
that's the only situation where I look at it and go, yeah, late second round, I take him.
you're 14th.
That was my 14.
Oh, that or yeah. So
Yeah, so you're 14.
my 14th was Drake London. I think Drake London, he's been a guy that unfortunately has been a little bit more slept on throughout these last couple of seasons just because of
Hmm.
Arthur Smith and his willingness and joy of shoving the crayons both up his nose and up other places on his body and just not knowing how to utilize them. But Drake London has never actually had a quarterback throw him the ball. He has Kirk Cousins coming in to do that. Now I know, we could make fun of the Vikings for drafting of
Hmm.
Michael
Michael
Penix,
Penix.
but you know, by the time Michael Penix is going to be playing, Drake London's going to be a senior citizen. So
Hmm.
it's Drake London. I think people forget how special of a talent he is. He was a top 10 pick for a reason, and he is a damn good wide receiver. And with Kirk Cousins going out there and getting him the ball, and with their new offensive play caller in Atlanta, there should be opportunities where Drake London is not going to be the decoy. He's actually going to be used as a primary target. And yeah, I don't think it's going to be quite as special as Kirk and Justin were, but it's going to be a damn good relationship that they have.
Yeah, Drake London for me, I looked at him for a long time and tried to put him on my list. But for the same reason I left Kyle Pitts off of there, I left Drake London off my list.
He has
Because,
that Arthur Smith stank on him.
well, and not just the Arthur Smith stank, but the will Kirk Cousins be as good? Will Kirk Cousins be able to come back from that Achilles injury and be that guy who's still hitting dimes?
Yeah.
And so that's where my concern lies with that. That's why, for the most part, I've avoided the Atlanta Falcons players throughout this fantasy lineup that we've been doing. Bijan Robinson only barely made my top 10. Um, so yeah, Drake London is just off my list. I played around with it. So he didn't manage to steal that number 15 spot for me. The guy who did land in my number 15 is Chris Olave. And I know he's catching from Poopy Pants Car, but he had great numbers last year, and I don't see any reason why that's going to change. The Saints didn't do a lot, but that's okay because they were still relevant all last year. I think it's going to be tougher for them with the Falcons getting better this year, with the Bucks getting better this year, with the Panthers maybe finally being able to do something. But I think we're still I think you can expect to get out of Chris Olave this year what you got last year with possibly an extra touchdown or two.
Yeah, Chris Olave for me is not on my list. I'll actually talk about him a little bit later, but Yeah, for me, he's not on there. And at 15 for me is DK. I already touched on him. Last
Yep.
thing I want to mention about Drake London is his ADP 25, little bit richer for my blood than I would like it there. But if he's somehow there in the late fourth, early fifth, that's where I would be really comfortable jumping on top of him for that type of range. But yeah, so that was my top 15. Did we mention your top 15?
Yep, that was my
Okay.
top 15 because that Olave is who landed in my spot.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so let's jump into some of your quick sleeper picks that you really really like, and then some others as well. Or the
Yeah.
players that we don't
So I
love at
mean,
ADP.
for myself, sleepers to look out for. The top one on my list was Christian Watson with Green Bay Packers. Um, his ADP is 100, so right at the end of the 10th round, and I think that's a good spot to grab him at for sure. Uh, he's looking to have a big year. You know, that whole division has got better. Jordan Love has improved. I think he's going to have to step up and put up big numbers if the Packers want to stay relevant in the NFC North. And so I think he is a good guy to scoop up if he's still there in your 10th, 11th round as your wide receiver two or even a flex spot. He is a worthwhile grab for me.
How about some of your others?
Uh, I also have Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mentioned DK Metcalf, and I did mention Jackson Smith as well. ADP of 111. If DK Metcalf does not manage to take that leap, then Njigba will. Like that ADP being in the 12th round, he is going to be a great guy for your wide receiver two or a flex spot. I'd be comfortable taking him anytime after the 8th round, if I'm being totally honest with you. Um, Following that, shortly after, is Keon Coleman with the Buffalo Bills. We talked about him a little bit last week when we were doing the tight ends. His ADP is at 114, so again, 12th round. This is a bit of a riskier one because I don't expect those numbers to be there right away. But as soon as we have a game where Josh Allen hits Keon Coleman and things start happening and Josh Allen realizes he can trust him, it's just going to be through the roof. His stock is going to skyrocket at that point, and Keon Coleman is going to be the number one receiver in Buffalo. Um, Other than that, the other ones I have is the Carolina Panthers team as a whole. They can only get better this year as a team. Like it was a garbage team last year. Their number one last year, I believe, was Jonathan Mingo, who I've got on this list here. His ADP is 274, so he's not even going to get drafted likely. He's a guy that I have on that sleeper list purely as a watch out in case, like flag him for a free agency flyer in case Deontay Johnson or Xavier Legette get injured and Bryce Young is able to throw the ball. So the thing with this is just that. Can Bryce Young find that form that landed him as a number one overall pick? Can the Carolina Panthers offensive line protect him long enough to go through his progressions and find these guys? He's got better wide receivers now. He's got Deontay Johnson. He's got Xavier Legette. And so Johnson with an ADP of 87, that's a little rich for me, but I expect to see that fall a little bit. If you can get Johnson in the 9th, 10th, 11th round, grab him up because I think even with this team, I think he's still going to be able to put up over 1,000 yards. He was a consistent 1,000-yard receiver in Pittsburgh. I think he's still going to be able to do that. I don't think the touchdowns will be there, much like in Pittsburgh. That is where Xavier Legette comes in. He is a dynamic, just explosive player, and I think he's going to be your touchdown guy for that Carolina Panthers team. And at an ADP of 162, looking at the 17th round, you might be able to pick him up as a flyer. You might be able to just take a stab at him as your final pick and just be like, you're going to sit on my bench. And if this Panthers team is able to get something going, then all of a sudden you have a guy on your bench that you can plug into your flex spot or your wide receiver two spot and get yourself some really good yards. And so the Panthers team as a whole is something that I wouldn't draft any of those wide receivers in the first 10 rounds. But if you can get one of them in your final 3 or 4 rounds, or even in your last round in Deontay Johnson or Xavier Legette, that could be a sneaky sleeper that a lot of guys aren't going to be looking at because of how bad the Carolina Panthers have been for the last 2 seasons.
Fair. For me, my sleepers are first one is Tank Dell at 67. I almost had him as a top 15 guy. It was between him and DK for me. I think Tank Dell at 67. I think he's going to be really, really good. There's a bunch of guys on this list that are ahead of him that I would go. I would rather have Tank Dell than T. Higgins or Malik Neighbors or George Pickens because I think that offense, he's going to just have that consistency. He's back. He's going to be healthy. And we saw what he was like last year where he was just so explosive. I really think he's going to be able to kind of come back and have a really, really special year, especially now that Stephon Diggs is also there. Like how I was
Mhm.
saying, how people are going to kind of forget about Nico Collins. They could just as easily forget about Tank Dell as well. My next guy I have is the first of two rookies that I have on this list. I have Brian Thompson Jr., the first round pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting about Brian Thomas just because that he was the fourth receiver in this year's class. He was the best of the rest, and he's going into an offense where he isn't going to be asked to be the number one receiver, but he could very easily quickly become the number one wide receiver because he is big, he is fast, and he has good hands. You just put the ball in his hands, and he's going to make good things happen. And I think Trevor Lawrence is quickly going to learn that you're going to target this guy early and you should target him often because he is going to make some plays. Now, is he Marvin Harrison or, Malik Neighbors or Romo Dunze? No. But at 4, and his ADP at 115, I like that as well. So he's, what would that be, 12th round?
Yeah.
I think that's perfect territory for him. He's going to be insanely fun to watch. The other rookie that I have is Malachi Corey, the second round pick for the New York Jets. Malachi Corey, other than the top three guys in Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Romo Dunze, was my favorite receiver in this draft. This guy reminds me so much of DJ Moore, of just his run after catch ability, and the fact that he's going to go into an offense with Garrett Wilson out there as well. And Aaron Rodgers is a smart guy. He's going to
Mhm.
quickly realize if you put the ball in this kid's hands, he is going to absolutely fly with it. And his ADP is 225. So if you can get like this is a guy that chances are probably won't even be drafted. And if you just want to go for it, just going like, okay, it's going to be a little bit of a project maybe at the start of the year, but you bring him on. And once Aaron Rodgers starts to find him in games, it's going to be a world of fun for you to have. And again, Garrett Wilson, number one receiver, so it's not like Malachi Corey is going to be targeted or, double teamed often. People are going to forget about
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I like that Brian Thomas one. That's a good sleeper pick for sure. So that was all you had for sleepers.
it. That's all I had for my sleepers.
So I do have a few guys to avoid at their current ADP, and two of them are on your top 15 list. So the first one is Devonte Adams. That ADP of 17 has me worried only because of
I
the
don't love it at
inconsistent.
yeah, I don't love him at that
Yeah,
ADP
it's
either.
that inconsistent QB play, and the fact that yes, if it is why am I spacing on quarterback
Oh,
Raiders?
Gardner Minshew or
Yeah, if
Aiden
it is
O'Connell.
Minshew starting, then yes, I'm much more comfortable. But as it stands right now, they're still saying Aiden O'Connell is their starter. And that to me is it's a no-fly zone for Devontae Adams. If he falls to like the fifth or sixth round, yeah, I'm gonna grab him. But in the middle of the second round, I am not spending a pick on him if he's catching passes from Aiden O'Connell. Because I cannot trust that.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's why Devonte Adams wasn't on my list, and that's why I just say avoid at that ADP. If you can get him later, grab him up because, as you said, Devonte Adams still one of the best receivers in the league. My other guy is Nico Collins, and that's because with Stephon Diggs there, I'm worried it's going to take away from what Nico Collins is going to be getting. And there's going to be those questions of who's the number one, who should be getting the ball more, and it's going to create a bit of a drop off for Nico Collins. And again, this is only at that ADP of 28. Late third round, I don't like taking Nico Collins that early. If you get him later, early fifth round, sixth round, something like that, I am super comfortable having Nico Collins as my number 2 wide receiver. Because yeah, he's going to put up good yards, good stats. I just am not comfortable with him being in that wide receiver number 1 discussion. And then the third guy for me is Malik Neighbors. For the obvious reason that he's playing for the Giants. Yeah, he's going to be the number 1 weapon in every facet of the game because he's the only star they have there. But it's Daniel Jones that's going to hurt that fantasy ability. I compare this to like Garrett Wilson last year losing Aaron Rodgers. Like, yeah, Garrett Wilson was still able to put up over 1,000 yards, but he only got 3 touchdowns. And that's where those fantasy numbers start to get hurt, is the lack of touchdowns. And he averaged about 12 points a week. I'm thinking Neighbors is going to likely put up less than that with Daniel Jones throwing on the ball. So that's for me, with an ADP of 55. I don't like it. If Neighbors gets slept on and everybody lets him go by, and it's late draft and you've got a keeper league and you're like, okay, well, Daniel Jones won't be there forever, and you want to grab a young wide receiver to throw on your bench for a season or two until he has someone to throw the ball to, then take Malik Neighbors. But as it stands for a 1-year league, I don't think he is a worthwhile pickup, even for a flex position, to be honest.
Yeah, I Malik Neighbors was also on my list. He was simply just, if you're in a single year, honestly just avoid him, because
Yeah.
and honestly, this is one of those things where we're gonna say this and it's gonna bite us in the ass. But
Yep.
like, to me, it's, we all know my stance on Daniel Jones. He's the worst starting quarterback in football. He shouldn't be a starting quarterback. He shouldn't be paid $45 million a season. But regardless of the fact, is Malik Neighbors, he's the only offensive weapon. Can anyone else name a single offensive player on that offense that isn't named Daniel Jones? And if you're not a Giants fan, the answer is probably and if you are a Giants fan, you're grasping at straws.
Yeah.
And again, so you and I are complete agreements with that. But similar to how you had 2, I only have 1 guy from your top 15. That's Chris Olave. For me, the Saints have just been a team that has just been getting worse and worse and worse year in, year out. And Derek Carr was not good last year. He simply wasn't. And Dennis Allen, I do not have a lot of hope in as him as the head coach. I was surprised they kept him on this year, to be perfectly honest with you. I look at the Saints team and I go, the division is getting a lot tougher. The quarterback is not getting better. He's probably only going to be getting worse. And I think for Chris Olave, his ADP at 20, I am seriously, I to be honest, I don't know where I would take Chris Olave. I would probably be comfortable in the 8th round, honestly, but not in the late second, early third. To me, that is
Mhm.
way, way, way too high up on that list. And the only other guy that I have to kind of avoid, especially at their ADP, is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper sitting at 49, so late 4th, early 5th. I'm concerned about that Browns offense, man. Like, Kevin Stefanski is a brilliant mind in the NFL. I don't know what Deshaun Watson is going to look like. I don't know who
Yeah.
their quarterback is going to be for most of the year. And Amari Cooper, he had a couple of outstanding weeks last year, but he also had weeks where it was a goose egg, where it was
Mhm.
literal zeros, and you're looking at it going like, my goodness. So I just
Well,
look at it and go, at 49, if he's there in round 10, I would probably consider it. I'd be like, okay, what is my wide receiver room looking like? If I want him as a sexy fifth, just on my league of just going, I'll have a fifth wide receiver just to have a fifth wide receiver. If I'm really trying to flex my muscles in any sort of way, that's kind of where I'd go. But again, a guy that could very easily burn us in that scenario where he is a phenomenal wide receiver. It's just that offense is a serious question mark.
Well, and he's going to be losing some targets this year because they have Jerry Judy there now as well. So yeah, I agree with that one. Amari Cooper at that ADP, you wanna look at him as maybe a, like you said, fifth or even fourth, somebody who's going to come in and cover a bye week for your flex player type of deal.
Yeah, and you're really hoping that bye week is one of the weeks where he goes off because again,
Yeah,
with Amari Cooper, there was games where he had 40 plus points. I think there was a game where he had like 49 or something like that last year.
but I think those only came once Joe Flacco showed up.
Yeah, just
I don't
as a
believe he had any of those early in the season when it was Deshaun Watson or Dorian Thompson Robinson.
yeah, I'm just gonna try to quickly take a look at the game logs from last year. I can't particularly seem to find it. But like Amari Cooper, he's a consistent 1,000 yard wide receiver. He had 5 touchdowns last year. It's like again, it's just he's gonna put up good numbers. It's just there's gonna be some games where he loses you your week because he
Yeah.
just doesn't get anything done, and then he's gonna be the very reason that you're gonna win a week, but you just don't know. And it's weird to look at, man. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to think about. But I know you gotta get going here. I think we went a little bit longer than what you potentially might have liked. But that is our wide receiver fantasy rankings. I don't know if we're gonna do one for defense and special teams. It just kind of feels like you're just gonna throw one at a dartboard for any of those. But until next time, I'm Brendan, First Sterling, saying peace.